All right, Kelsey, what do you got in your hands?
I have my speaker notes about the slides that I'm reviewing. So, stakeholders in space, the chain reaction that we were talking about, the literature review, the multilateral charter, and the mission architecture framework.
That's right.
Yes.
And how are we going to get there?
We are going to get there with an autonomous car. What is it called? Like Waymo?
It's called a Waymo.
Yeah, I've never driven in an autonomous car.
Me either.
I didn't even know they were a thing yet.
Oh yeah.
So that's exciting.
The future is here.
The future is here.
Well, that was an unsatisfying experience.
No, it was so bad. Like, we don't have time for this.
Turns out the future is not yet here.
No.
Gotta give the future a little bit more time to get its shoes on and get out the door.
We're gonna bring the future though.
Yeah. We're gonna get there eventually.
The feedback that we've gotten has been absolutely invaluable. I mean, it's been amazing, and everyone's so interested in our paper, and I think it's because it's so bold. Yeah. It's like what gave us the right.
We'll have more thoughts to follow.
We will.
We're going to the space conference.
One of us was too hot. Everyone was so nice. Okay, Daniel, how did your first conference go?
All right, so we just got back from the 18th annual ESCA Space Policy Workshop, and we presented as one of the panels. Kelsey, what is your immediate reaction? How'd you feel it went?
I thought it went absolutely wonderful. I mean, it was difficult and it was daunting how scary it was as an undergraduate, because everyone at this conference, I don't think there were any students. I mean, there were
We were
PhD.
the only students that were there at least today.
Yeah, and like there were PhD students like sitting in from Georgia Tech, but we were the only students presenting. Everyone else like had a doctorate, or they were a space lawyer, or someone had come from Ghana to talk about the political dynamics of space through an African lens.
There were people coming from all over.
Yeah.
There was one person from Turkey, another was coming at us live from Jerusalem, and was like, I might need to stop this in case there's like a missile.
That was crazy.
People from like, I think there's the lady from South Africa and lots of people from Europe.
Yeah, so it was easy to feel intimidated out of my depth, and that never really went away, but I definitely felt better because a lot of it was virtual, and so I was able to see the day before kind of what the precedent was, and I felt a lot better knowing what the precedent was and what the room was going to look like. And so I think knowing your surroundings is a very big part.
Kelsey was very worried going into it that the PowerPoint that we were going to give them was just not going to cut it as far as, the layout and being professional enough and sort of fitting whatever the standard model of the format is. But it definitely seemed like, every PowerPoint was different.
It really did. Yeah, some people did their citations a different way. Like, I know for me, I was really stressed out about the literature review. I was freaking out about the literature review because I wanted to make sure the sources were cited exactly right. And I was even wondering, was there a call for papers? Was there formatting guidelines? And we actually never even submitted a paper. It was just presentations. One thing I did notice was that it was interchangeable constantly, where they would say, like, if they presented a paper or presented their presentation, even though there was no
There never
paper.
was a paper. Yeah, they'd be like, and here's the next panelist with his paper. And be like, no, this is just a PowerPoint slideshow.
And it's worth mentioning that there was this one woman who didn't have a PowerPoint at all.
That's right. No, she just talked. Nothing wrong with that. I think that they seem to enjoy her content. But
That was...
So everyone had a different tack on it. And one thing that really stuck with me at the end was that one person came up to us and said, I couldn't believe you guys are graduate students. You had me fooled. I thought you guys were like academics, like career academics.
Yeah, and I'll carry that one with me for a long time.
Yeah, it was very high praise.
Yeah.
So we shaped up, right?
We sure did,
We showed up and we shaped up.
I think our paper presentation, here I'm interchanging terms again.
The phantom paper.
Yeah, the phantom paper. I feel like ours was interesting, and I think it garnered the most attention.
Yeah, we got a lot of comments. At the end, after we presented, there was a Q&A session. And, there's no requirement that, like, everyone has to ask X number of questions about every presentation. But I think that of the 3 panelists that presented during that session, we got the most questions directed toward us.
Did.
And even after it was done, people were still coming up to us and, wanting to talk about this or that. And yeah, and all the feedback we were getting was positive and constructive. and people were really, just to kind of give a brief summary of what we talked about. The gist of it was that we were focused on planetary science, which is the study of the other moons and the other planets in the solar system. And we were focused on looking at why is it that so often planetary science missions get canceled or they don't get seen all the way through. And a lot of this really has to do with the organization structure of it.
That's right.
And how it really is concentrated in the hands of a few governments. And if something happens politically within those governments that all of a sudden the project gets its funding revoked or whatever, then the whole thing gets nixed and you have to go back to the drawing board. Mm-hmm. And obviously we don't really think that's good. If you want to reap the benefits of space science and you want to do it reasonably quickly, expeditiously, you don't want your efforts to be wasted, just because your major partner pulled out or whatever. So we were looking at the institutional review.
Why do you think that we got the most questions by far and away of everybody? Because it was a considerable margin of people that flocked to us. Almost every single person who had a question, it was directed at us.
Yeah. Well, burying the lead a little bit, I think part of it was that we were the only ones who were in person.
That's true.
So during our session, there were 3 presentations. The other 2, those people presented on the big Teams call that was ongoing the entire time.
There were 30 papers that were presented total.
Yes.
Over the Thursday and Friday that this
30
academic workshop
papers / presentations based on theses.
Right.
Yeah. And so we had 3 questions directed towards us during the Q&A session, and then more comments after to follow. Right. And the guy who was hosting it from ESA, or rather I think he was from ESCA, which is a French university. That is a French acronym. I couldn't tell you what it stands for. But anyway, his name was Thomas Werber. He was the one who was putting the European side of it together.
He was the panel chair. And so every panel has a specific chair. And so all of the chairs were sitting there, but there's one that's more responsible than the other ones. Mm-hmm. And sort of to moderate the comments that people have, the questions, who gets asked what and what order, everything else. Yeah. He was wonderful. He was probably my favorite chair, and this is because he was the primary author responsible for the book on space power and politics. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, he was great. And on top of that, as we were presenting, I kept looking at him and I saw that he would nod or smile every time I brought up a point that, it seemed to really register with him. Like I talked about, for instance, the Mars sample return and how it's been delayed and, the progress has been frustrating. He was like,
Word.
And then, I mentioned how, ESA empowers the individual European countries to be part of important, efforts. And he was like, And then, after we were done, he was like, I've written a couple papers that are sort of right up your alley, and he recommended further readings that we could look into because he's done research that's not too far removed from what we were looking at.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, everything that we talked on was right his lane, and that's another thing that I would recommend going into an academic workshop or a conference again. Research the chairs and what the chairs' work looks like, because I think you get out of an academic workshop as much as you put in. And I saw this all across the board. People who'd put in a lot of effort, they got the most feedback. And you could see that, and you could almost quantify it in the amount of feedback that they got versus the amount of data sets they had and how much they were working with and how many slides that they had. And that was a comforting thought to me, because the people who put in the most amount of work and who take it the most serious get the most comments. The end goal of this academic workshop was to, originally in the call for papers, they said it was to publish another version of this Space Power and Politics book. But they were looking at a couple of different journals, and
Rutledge, I think, was one of them.
Yes, that is correct, because that's the Space Power and Politics. They were looking at adding an edition or a chapter to it, and then they were looking at New Space. Some other journals they were looking at that would fit well with the certain panelists' topics.
I know we still don't really know exactly who they're going to end up picking for that. I think that they're going to give us feedback later on down the line, in the form of email or whatever, with additional information about all of that.
Yeah, but they definitely made it seem like it wasn't this super super selective thing. If you got chosen for an academic workshop, there is a pretty considerable chance that you got that.
Yeah, I got the vibe. There was no Simon Cowell in the in the panel of judges who was going that's awful, that's terrible, that's a joke, you know, whatever. It was like, yeah, this is cool, and you know, now you've considered this, and now you've considered that. Another thing I noticed was that the people, not just the official chairs, but also other people in the audience who asked questions, really seemed to glom onto, for lack of a better word, sexy numbers. You know?
That's so true.
Like,
yeah,
if there
that's a
was,
good
if
point.
you had a statistic that like really epitomized something interesting, or like the statistic tells us the story, then that was something that people were really like, oh, I gotta know more about that.
Yeah,
So
like-
for instance, we had our scale of space operational levels
That's
from
right.
1 to 7, right, where all the different space agencies were ranked in terms of their technical capacity to do stuff in space, right? And there were a lot on the lower end, and then 3 on the highest end, which was the United States, Russia, and China. But there was 0 at level 5, and one guy was like, "That's very interesting. Why is that?" And it was, well, as it turns out, level 5 is a country that has the ability to launch its own astronauts, and level 6 is a country that has the ability to have a space station. And every country that has launched its own astronauts also has had a space station. So I guess countries that launch astronauts really think that having a space station is important. Go figure.
Which is an interesting numbers. I know when you looked over the data set, you did the numbers, because the point of that was, and I don't want to get too far off topic from the purpose of the academic workshop, but it's just so interesting to me. Well, actually, I think it'd be better if you explained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were looking at how there's 76 countries with space agencies, which is a surprising number if you're not someone who's like an expert on miscellaneous niche space agencies, because it's probably like 7 or 8 that do the vast majority of the space projects, right? And so knowing that, it means that you have a lot of countries that like they have a space agency. It's a category in their budget that they're spending money on. But a lot of them really aren't really part of anything, or at least, they're not getting involved perhaps to the extent that they could be, because they could contribute like an instrument or a researcher or, a piece of propulsion equipment or a solar panel or whatever, something small but important for the larger overall objective.
And I would like to address the schematics and what we were actually talking about in depth later on. But as far as the academic workshop goes, I'm wondering if there's any other thoughts that I had about it in particular. I thought everyone was incredibly kind. I mean, incredibly kind. Everyone was very supportive. I mean, I don't know if it's just the academic workshop that we went to because we were the only students, but the networking was crazy. I mean, the networking was crazy.
Yeah, it's a great way to meet people, and everyone who's there is there because they're passionate about the stuff. And so if you have engaged critically with the subject and you've brought something interesting, to show off, then people are going to be like, ooh, I want to learn more about that, or ooh, I want to talk to those people because that resonated with me, And so we had a couple of those, a couple of people who were like, wow, that's so cool. One girl was a PhD student, right, at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is where the event was being held. And she was sitting in and watching it, and so we exchanged LinkedIn information, and she was like, "Yeah, this is so cool. I want to talk to you about this and that."
And I met a girl, also PhD studying astrophysics, and that was really cool. But she just like decided to show up as a hobby, which my kind of hobby. But I feel like our research in particular, and this could just be a personal opinion or an unpopular opinion, but I feel like our research was the most bold claim. Because it was such a rework of everything in every big space agency. And I think this claim is only emboldened by the fact that, like, I'm an undergraduate student and he's a master's student. We're the only students.
I guess to clarify, a lot of the projects were really just kind of reflective. Like, the guy from Ghana, he did basically historiography, so he was talking about like the history of space law and space cooperation, but from the African perspective. We had one guy today who was talking about space in popular culture and social media engagement with different space agencies and astronauts, and how that's a bellwether for level of public interest in different things. But we were both surveying the landscape of policy cooperation and also making fairly sweeping recommendations for how to change it. And I would say that there wasn't really a whole lot of that. There was one woman who was proposing a register of negative space incidents, which was very interesting.
It was very interesting.
Because there are registers of launches, but there's not really a register of like, you know, some debris fell on my house or whatever. I mean, there's sort of, you know, the big ones are remembered in the public consciousness, but there's not really like a proper documentation process for it, which is very interesting. She was saying that made it hard for people to find the legal standing in order to actually file a suit, because there was no procedure by which they could, you know, address their damages, right? So that was very interesting.
Yeah, and this was by the space lawyer. So like I said, everyone had their lane, everyone had their niche. There was a few space lawyers there, and I expected a workshop, foolishly probably, that a lot of them would be researchers, like John Logsdon or, you know, Audrey Schaefer or any of the other highly cited researchers in that sphere. Scott Pace, of course. Scotty P. Yeah. But yeah, there was really people across every single country. I felt like the UN almost. I don't know if like,
it was like a representative sample of the world.
Yes, it was really cool. And this is the only workshop I've ever been to, so I don't know. This is going to be a fun litmus test for other ones that I go to in the future. But this was also our first abstract acceptance, or the only thing we've ever written an abstract for, and the other one we're waiting on for IAC.
It's the same, basically. It's a very similar abstract. Yeah. It's a little bit more of a different focus in the same subject. Yeah.
But this is the first one that we've heard back from, and it's our first.
And ideally, more to follow.
More to follow, yeah. And so
we're not counting ourselves out.
But this is going to be an excellent litmus test to see if all academic workshops are this diverse. I know it was a big strength of it going in because it was co-funded by the European Union.
That's right.
And it was very beautiful seeing people from the UK especially. There was a lot of folks from the UK. It was very, very fun seeing them try Chick-fil-A. And Arnold Palmer, that was
Thomas Horber, bless his heart, was like, what am I supposed to do with this? Mixing these things? The sweet tea and the lemonade in the same cup? Like, yeah, dude, trust us. You know?
It was amazing. Yeah, it turned into a picnic there, and we'll explain why. He's got all the footage. People were like evacuating the building. He was taking the video.
Unfortunately, we had to evacuate the building because there was some sort of unspecified emergency. But we still got to have our Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A picnic with all of the space people.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most wonderful. The weather's nice, but a little hot.
It's a little hot, but that's all right.
Yeah, we'll live.
Oh my gosh, it was so fun. Yeah, I can't wait to do it again. My fear is that I'm going to be spoiled on these workshops because this one was just so fun and the people were amazing. And to be honest, I mean, I was very scared and very intimidated, but I loved the fact that we were the only students. I loved it.
We were in a league of our own.
Yeah, and I liked it because now I find the beauty in it now that the stress is off. But yeah, you're right. We were in a league all of our own. And so the only people that we really had to compare ourselves to was ourselves. Like we were the only lane, and I wish that I had seen this perspective before when I was under the scope of all the stress and everything else, and I wanted to compare myself to these people. There was a lot of late night
cramming it towards the end.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Don't procrastinate on this.
Time management.
Time management is a virtue.
That is applicable universally for everything.
Yes, and that's something that I wish I would have focused less on the paper and more on the presentation. And I also think that focusing more on the presentation would have helped me to write the paper and vice versa. Because for some reason, I thought that they were randomly going to ask about a paper. And so I was really nervous about it.
Like a pop quiz.
Like a pop quiz, yeah. Or during the Q&A, they're like, well, can I see your citations? Yeah. Or there was going to be some crazy, like I said, this is my first one. And I would see formatting guidelines for other academic workshops. So I was so scared. But yeah, I think going into it, I probably would have practiced the presentation way more because I was nervous, and then the time constraint. Yeah, like I would have run laps around the presentation if I could do it over again. I wasn't very happy with the way I presented. I feel like I was discombobulated because the time, they only gave us like 15 minutes.
I think it was total 20, but the start of it was kind of eaten up by some technical difficulties.
Yeah, because they couldn't find the presentation at first.
It ended up being more like 17.
Yeah.
But I feel like we did all right, all things considered. I think we salvaged it. We got through every slide within the time allotted. We were kind of rushing towards the end, but by that point we'd already kind of set the groundwork, so we could just kind of say, like, as we mentioned before, this and that, and then the conclusion.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then of course people, I think, liked it enough to ask us plenty of questions, and we gave, I think, satisfactory answers.
Yeah, but we never really felt like in the hot seat. I don't know how other academic workshops are scheduled. I feel like I've been using this disclaimer way too much. But we had where people would talk. There was a panelist, like maybe 3 or 4 for each panel, and the panel lasted for an hour and a half, and like everyone talked from like 15 to 20 minutes, and then they saved all the questions until the very end, and that was a 30-minute Q&A period.
Yeah.
But it went by super fast because different people were asking each other different questions and everything.
Everyone's getting questioned all at once.
Yes, and it felt so much better because they would all ask the questions in a row, and then you had time to think about these questions.
Yeah.
It was such a relaxing, like confrontational
it was never like
thing.
interrogative.
Yes, and I loved that. Like I said, that's something that I would love for all academic conferences to be like, but I was even trying to find resources, and that's probably why I'm going to post this. I was trying so hard to find resources online about an academic workshop. I knew space policy, like trying to find a space policy workshop, that just wasn't going to happen on YouTube. But finding any sort of academic workshop, I feel like it was just conference videos. And so I think it's very beneficial to maybe have more resources out there on academic workshops and what to expect.
Okay.
But this is just our experience. It could be very, very different.
Your mileage may vary.
Yeah, mileage may vary. I feel like academic workshops, and it's a beautiful thing, also kind of scary, there are more unknown variables and it's more freeform. Yeah.
And I think a lot of what we've talked about applies not just to space policy workshops, which is probably kind of a niche thing, but other verticals as well. Like if you're into marine biology or life sciences or biochemistry or whatever. I mean, soil science. Who knows? There's workshops for all sorts of stuff. And if you've got an interest, if you got a research passion, I think it's worthwhile to go out and meet other people in the field so that you can have these exciting conversations about things that interest you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, with all that said, hopefully the next time we talk about this kind of thing, we'll be in Antalya, Turkey.
Yep, that's right.
For IAC 2026.
Halfway across the world.
Yes.
Because the world needs more space.
The world needs more space.
That's right.
Amen.
You have been watching